Shminitzim means 12th grader in Hebrew, but it also has another meaning: conscientious objector. Shimri Zameret was a Shministit for refusing to partake in conscription into the Israeli army when he left school. This cost him dearly. Shimri paid a visit to the Amnesty International offices in Dublin to tell us about what motivates him and his activism.
I'm 27. So basically, conscription in Israel is when you're 18. And I refused when I was 18, and I was in prison in different forms of kind of arrest for roughly 2 years, 21 months. It's kind of a complicated question when you talk about civil disobedience. What exactly is winning? I mean, I would say I won when the occupation of the Palestinian territories would be over. Why did I decide to refuse? Because I felt that what the army and what the government is doing in the Palestinian territories is immoral. And I felt like it's inhumane and unjust and illegal. So, and I thought I mean, like you said, I am patriotic in the sense that I care about the people that live in Israel and in Palestine, because I don't see it necessarily as a kind of through patriotism as through the national identity. I care about the Palestinians and the Israelis that live where I live. A, I didn't want to take part in making it worse, and B, I wanted to make it better. And I felt that refusing and civil disobedience and going to prison and making it public and doing interviews and speaking on mass media and writing a column about it, which I did, is an effective way of delivering the message of why we are against the occupation, why I am against the occupation. I think people were objecting, the objectors, the conscientious objectors, and there was a lot of hatred towards refuseniks, occupation refuseniks, as we refer to ourselves. I think, to me, a lot of the kind of emotional reaction was a testimony of the fact that it was effective. You know, if you get an emotional reaction from people, it means that you're touching them, and you maybe in this case, that's what I hope, that's what I think, is that you get an emotional reaction because you confront people with the gap between their values and their actions, and that's a very tough position to be in. You know, they want to believe that they're humanists, but then we come and we say, you're not humanist, look at A, B, C, D, E, F, etc. And it's painful. People don't want to see that. People don't want to see the mirror. We went on this trip today about James Joyce saying that the artist, the role of the artist in society is to put a mirror in front of society and in front of citizens. I think in a way the role of the political activist is the same, although maybe we're trying to get to a more general public than Joyce did. Things are getting harder in Israel. I mean, I think that dissent was much easier 10 years ago or 7 years ago than it is now. And I think this is something that I was thinking about in the last few weeks. I was just in Israel now, and I'm working on a new project now that is called New Approaches to the Palestinian-Israeli Conflict. And I was in Israel, and I went to a few meetings regarding this project with human rights organizations in Israel. And it is incredible to see how scared people are with the new right-wing government, and how seriously oppressed human rights NGOs in Israel feel. And essentially, all of the human rights NGOs in Israel made a decision to avoid approaching international tribunals like the International Criminal Court. I felt like, in many ways, I am scared of going back to Israel. And I'm scared. I feel like I am delegitimized because I'm working for human rights and because I'm working for peace. And I think that a lot of Israelis that live in Israel, definitely the Palestinian citizens of Israel that are working in these human rights organizations, feel scared by the oppression of the Israeli government. And I think I mean, what we need to do is, we need to fight against this in the Israeli context. We need to find ways to put pressure on the Israeli government and to prevent them from delegitimizing the human rights organization in Israel. The second thing we need to do is we need to find kind of a more structural, global way of dealing with this problem, which is not unique to Israel. Every government that is committing human rights violations want to prevent its human rights organization from reporting it to the world.
What do you say to people, you probably have got this a lot at home, but it's probably something that, it's a phrase that you hear a lot in America, is a Jew hating Jew or a self-hating Jew. Yeah.
I think it's funny. I think it's very funny. I guess the first thing is that I think ending the occupation is something that has a lot to do with loving Jews. And I think it's something, when I went to prison, I did it because I loved my family and I loved my society, and because I cared about the Jews in Israel. I think that ending the occupation is it's the best thing that can happen to Israel. Because what you have when you go back to Israel, what you see is a society that is corrupted by being an occupier. But I think if you look at Hamas, what I see is terror, a group that often targets civilians, and in many ways they are my enemy, in the same way that the Israeli right is my enemy. People that call for the killing everybody in the Gaza Strip, the Jewish side, are also my enemy because they're the enemies of the peace. But I think that what you need to do is you need to talk to them and change them. Who do you make peace with? With your enemy. So I think that Hamas is a complex group. There's parts of it that are very radical and that are anti-Semite, and we need to look at it and we need to acknowledge that. But I think that there's also a lot of parts in Hamas that are interested in changing Hamas and turning it into something else. And with those, we need to find those parts and negotiate with them. And if you listen to the statements of a lot of Hamas leaders in the past few years, they are talking about the 67 borders or pre-67 borders based compromise, which is something that is historic. The best thing that people here can do is help Palestinians and Israelis that are fighting against occupation, especially the ones that are working together to fight against occupation. I think that's the best strategy, and let them think and know that they're not alone and that they're being supported and that they're doing the right thing. I think that's a really important thing. And I think that another thing that is really important is for us to find ways to protect Israelis that are fighting against occupation and against human rights violations from the Israeli government, which is something that's very important this year because of the recent events in Israel. Yeah.
If you would like to offer your support to the Shminitzim, please log on to December18th.org. If you feel that you would like to advance the cause of human rights in general, please log on to Amnesty.ie and join 15,000 other like-minded people.